Let's bring in our panel straight in. Joining me tonight, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer Michael Costa and Liberal MP Garth Hamilton. Can we talk about some breaking news, you two? It's just come into us in the last 10 minutes or so. It seems there's been a back down of sort for the first time. I'm talking COP here. For the first time explicitly, it seems, I'll go to you first, Michael. Leaders at COP28 have agreed to, quote, transition away from fossil fuels. This is the second draft text. It's just been released and it says it's calling for countries to transition away from fossil fuel in energy systems in a just, orderly and equitable manner, accelerating action this decade. Man, it's very much language talking around the problem. What do you make of that, Michael? I mean, try and unpick it for me.
Oh, look, Steve, I think that's just nonsense. It's just a motherhood statement. What is the meaning of that? What the fanatics wanted, the climate change hysterics wanted, was a firmer statement from all of the participants that fossil fuels would be almost eliminated almost immediately, and that's not what they've got. That's just a motherhood statement. It could be read any way you want. All that stuff about justice and all that sort of stuff is just meaningless. Look, that whole thing's been a fiasco. And we look stupid thanks to our energy minister being over there. And I'm not talking about that embarrassing welcome to country. I'm talking about the fact that our economy, and we've just had the MYEFO released, shows how dependent we are on these fossil fuels. And there's no way in the world that we will be in a position over the next decade to do anything like what's implied in that statement. So it's just nonsense. And I'm sure people will be walking it back as soon as they leave.
Garth, I mean, from a Queensland point of view, I mean, I guess this is better news because, you know, the strident language coming out of the zealots through this conference has been unbelievable. But at the end of the day, when they had to put out their communique and put it in writing, they've sort of gone, oh, well, you know, maybe we've gone a bit hard.
They went weak at the knees. Look, firstly, I'm looking forward to seeing these people walk or swim home from Dubai, to immediately get out of fossil fuels. You know, that'd be a great show of support and strength for their wonderful cause. But what a silly statement. I mean, can we just point out now, COP is meaningless. It is absolutely meaningless. We're in a cost of living crisis that is affecting all Australians. Energy prices are soaring. And despite having some of the highest uptake of solar energy in the world, particularly on homes and houses, our prices are still through the roof. If it was cheaper, it would be working. This is not about what's affecting the average mum or dad around the kitchen table, or particularly young Australians hoping to get onto the housing ladder. This is completely, self-absorbed, elitist. Has nothing to do with the real world. And I'm glad, if I can say one good thing about this, I'm glad I'm not there.
Garth, I mean, when you look at it, how foolish to hold a climate change gathering of where apparently 100,000 people turned up in the middle of the UAE, which pumps oil out of the sand, turns it into petrol. It's a fossil fuel. Well, who thought that was a good idea?
Look, it's the ultimate rebrand, isn't it? You know, the gritty reboot of the Middle East that they care about. These sort of things. I lived over there and worked over there for quite a number of years. I remember driving through the deserts, seeing the smoke billowing out into the sky, the desalination plants pumping brine out and killing fish in the Red Sea. I can remember these things. The pretense that there's some sort of new green world going on over there. It is pretense. And I think we just need to come back to what sensible policy we can, which is ensuring that we have cheap and reliable power for Australians to use and for our economy to get ahead.
Michael Costa, you were a brilliant New South Wales Treasurer in your day. You brought down budgets. How do you think Jim Chalmers is going at the moment? How ambitious do you reckon he is?
Not very ambitious at all. It's all luck at the moment. Look, this statement's just full of smoke and mirrors again. I mean, if you actually look at the things that the government has done to do anything with that surplus, it's basically the immigration program, and that's got a massive negative for everybody in the community. I mean, the two key factors, of course, are commodity prices. They're estimating that coal and iron ore are going to be half the value that they are currently next year. That's so they can announce on budget night a big surplus and say how wonderful they are. But you look at tax take, it's just staggering. And that's, again, driven by the lack of the government cutting back its cost base, but more importantly by the immigration program, and that's the reason they're addicted to it. They're talking about a $65 billion increase over the forward estimates. That's just staggering. In this year alone, they're talking about $20 billion in between corporate and pay-as-you-go tax. It's just extraordinary. And if you actually look at the cost-cutting measures, they're not there. The NDIS, they squibbed it. They basically set up a second honey pot with the states, and you're going to see that blow out over the next decade for sure as people work out how they can get that money. And the only costs that they really did cut were infrastructure, which we need to support our cities that have got, 1.5 million new people coming in over the next 4 or 5 years. It's just extraordinary. And remember, the debt is still heading towards $1 trillion. So, you'd probably give him a C. At least he's tried to pretend he's got a surplus.
Garth, I mean, just talking to Ross Greenwood there, and he described, Australia and the economy as an onion, and that the people are really doing it hard are those who are on the fringes of our major capital cities, whether it be Brisbane or Sydney or Melbourne. What anecdotally are you hearing about how hard people in your electorate, for example, are doing it on cost of living?
Look, the stories that always hit me the hardest are the young Australians in their 20s trying to imagine a way that they can get a house, that they can just buy a house, have that part of the Australian dream. They're paying rent at the moment, rent's through the roof. That's if they can find somewhere to rent and they're not living at their parents'. The cost of everything is through the roof. They've got no ability to save, no bank wants to talk to them. And they're competing with 500,000 new Australians in the last 12 months to get into the housing market. It's heartbreaking because I think that's the formative part of your years. That's the formative part of how we build this nation. We create homes for people in whatever shape they may be, but that's how we pass on our traditions and our values. And to watch people see that Australian dream slip away from them, it's devastating.
Michael, I think we were pretty surprised this morning when we learned that the Albanese government has changed its stance on Israel today. They've had our ambassador to the UN put his hand up and vote for the UN's resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Here's what the ambassador said. I saw it on Sky this morning.
In defending itself, Israel must respect international law, including international humanitarian law. Civilians and civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, must be protected. Hamas must be defeated and dismantled, but this cannot be without account for the protection and welfare of Palestinian civilians. President, Australia supports Palestinians' right to self-determination.
Michael, we also signed a statement with New Zealand and Canada defending Israel's right to defend itself and calling for the disarming of Hamas, but calling for a ceasefire. I mean, and we've walked away from our biggest ally, the Americans.
Yeah, it's disgraceful. And it is about internal ALP politics, and it's about seats in Western Sydney, unfortunately. And I think it's a foolish position for them to have taken. I mean, the fact of the matter is we just voted with places like Syria, who's killing all of their civilian populations indiscriminately, allegedly with chemical weapons, and Russia, that's invaded Ukraine. I mean, they supported this resolution calling for humanitarian care and, a ceasefire. I don't see any ceasefire in Russia. So the fact that we've aligned ourselves with these people instead of the US is absolutely a disgrace. It's actually grotesque when you think about it. The bottom line is it undermines Israel's ability to finish this war quickly. The call for a ceasefire is one that's not respected by Hamas. We already saw that, and nor should we even entail supporting anything that would give them comfort. The bottom line is Israel's got to continue, and yes, it's got to make sure it abides by international law, and I think it is doing that. They're going to pains to make sure that they do that. But the civilians and Hamas are intertwined, and that's unfortunate, and that's the reality.
Garth, were you surprised that Labor went this direction, or do you agree with Michael that this is more about domestic politics and saving seats in places like Western Sydney?
Well, I guess I'm surprised to find that our Prime Minister is weaker than Joe Biden. That's what he's proven himself, chasing these far-left votes rather than standing firm for what should be seen as one of Western democracy's greatest legacies. Israel is something that we, as Australians, have played our small part in, and so we should be a country we should be very proud to stand beside. I think it's incredible that we're trying to draw parallels between a terrorist organisation and a Western democracy when it's been very clear Israel has held a two-state solution out for a very, very long time. Hamas does not. Hamas does not want to recognise Israel. It does not want to take part in a two-state solution. We have one side that makes every effort to abide by its obligations. We have another side that committed the sort of atrocities, and I put this to you, Steve, if those atrocities that we saw in Israel were committed against Australians, do you think you'd care what another country thought as we did whatever it took to ensure that those atrocities would not happen again? I don't think I'd be very interested. Israel have made their terms clear. They want the hostages released, they want Hamas to surrender, and that's the terms of the ceasefire that they seek. I think we should be supporting our allies.